Martian Time Slip, which was published in 1964, is a novel written by Philip K. Dick, is about a human colony on Mars that is divided into two factions. One that wants to deport what it considers mental defects, the mentally ill, genetic mutations, people who are diagnosed with genetic mutations because of interplanetary sexual relations. Um, and there's another faction that believes that these people should be kept and that they're actually that they have certain gifts, certain kind of special abilities that need to be closely studied and utilized for that, for the purposes of that world and the development of that world. And an example was one of the main characters is a child, an autistic child, who is kept under very close observation under the belief that he has prophetic abilities. He's able to see into the future, he's able to send people into the future, and which on one faction, on one side, they of course believe that that's just a product of mental illness, that a fractured sense of time, an inability to see reality, see things rationally, is a product of irrationality. And of course the other side sees it as an opportunity to enhance their own world. And one of the other main characters is a man who's built a family on this planet, and he is diagnosed with schizophrenia, which of course is another ambiguity, another confounding element of the story that brings his own entire experience of this world into question, really. So it's a very the whole story is really an enigma, I would say. And it, for me personally, like as I was reading it, it just, I think what really struck me the most was that on the rare occasion that Philip K. Dick shows more of his optimistic side about things, that he shows, particularly through this autistic kid, that there's, that there can be that integration of a kind of a biological and a spiritual reality, and but there's this whole other side of that world that almost brought to mind. There's that, the very famous soliloquy in Macbeth, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. That sense of being this cogwheel in a giant machine, and being in this very unchanging kind of climate that you're trapped in, that will always accuse anybody who wants to think outside the box of too much idealism. Because there's this really more of an encouraged kind of cynicism in that culture, and so of course when people argue that, no, wait a minute, I think that this child might have certain abilities that we can use, it most people, which is, they're slightly more outnumbered by the negative faction, but they believe that is nonsense, that it's ridiculous, and that ultimately that things should be divided as in the same way that many places throughout history have been divided. There being a slave class and there being an upper class that controls everything. And but there's a flip side to the story, which is really offered by one of the main characters, and one quote that I would say, and really when he's deep in thought, that stood out to me was, that I may not be much, but all I have is myself. And later on in the story, that's followed up by the quote like, will time, or that things always change, that nothing ever stays the same, that you're always going forward, and there needs to be a sense that that we can all be flexible as a society. But in the meantime, it's very difficult to tell whether even the people who are putting them under close study really have the autistic kid's best interests at heart, or whether indeed this is just another whole other experiment that they're using to enslave him. And it's, you have to wonder whether it's a ploy of some kind, because the entire thing, regardless of which side that you're talking about, is indeed political. And there's not a very distinctly liberal, or I guess liberal is the right word, a liberal in the very true sense of the word aspect of this world. Everything is very structured in ways that are reminiscent of very ancient traditions, and but it does offer, like I said, a glimmer of hope about certain kinds of people in the future that can perhaps take down a lot of the flaws that are in the system that we're creating. Whereas I think Philip K. Dick mostly in the past has parodied or created a very ugly and dismal picture of what our world is going to look like, really to scare people, to get people to wake up. But in both cases, I don't think either tactic is better than the other. I think that both ultimately are really supposed to fuel change. And I think that the power of prophecy in this story is not just about a religious kind of voodoo nonsense. I think it's really about something a lot more mysterious and more powerful, I think, than that. However, there is, one confounding thing that makes you skeptical, I think, as a reader. Because Philip K. Dick is good at this. He's throwing these monkey wrenches into the story. There's another example where they encounter these things called water witches, which are essentially these dead bodies that they pull out of the pond. And they're these hideous creatures, I guess I could call them creatures, people, whatever. They look like they had died horrible deaths. And they are said to bring good luck in the story. And protect people in a psychic, spiritual sense. And that, of course, is, I would say, where probably your own more sardonic or more realistic side of you, when you're reading it, comes down and goes, no, you know what, I'm not sure if I really believe any of this. I think all of this is set up, that this is all a big setup for some bigger game of some kind. So the prophecy is bullshit. But those are just some questions that I would say are really important to think about, I guess, as you're reading this. And but I think regardless of all that, I think the child is innocent, of course. I think that he really is just inherently, just by himself, a force for good, even though the people who seem to have his best interests may have other motivations that are not so good. Thank you.